Hello you all, this is Rachel Kirkland here, the Modern Shaman. Thanks for being with me for this video. I'm actually doing a bit of a follow-up video, a part 2 to the previous video that Spirit was guiding me to instruct you all or teach you all or give you a sense of understanding about the importance of psychic protection during this time where there is a frenzy of fear and paranoia and chaos energy that is kind of feeding off of humanity during this time. This second part of this video, I mentioned in the first video, so if you haven't watched that, please watch that first. I mentioned that Spirit also guided me to speak on the topic of energetic hygiene and how this is so important during this time on the earth. So that first video just began to get too long and went over 30 minutes long. So I was like, okay, I'm going to stop and I'm going to do a second video on energetic hygiene. So that is the topic of this video discussion. Okay, so let's talk now about energetic hygiene. So if you're not familiar with that term, energetic hygiene is just the regular maintenance of our energetic body. Now, I shared this in the previous video, but I will reiterate here in case you haven't seen that video, that our energy body, our auric field, is typically about 5 feet out, an extension of our physical body, and it moves in layers, just like our physical body has layers of the epidermis or skin, and then there's organs in the center. The same is true for our auric field. It has layers to it, and it can be measured in terms of frequency, the strength of it, the health and vitality of it, the vibrancy of the colors that are shown within it. Those are all measurable and seen if you know how to read auric fields or just have a frequency meter to measure the amplification of the energetic body from our electromagnetic center, which is our heartbeat. There's a real physiological component to it, as well as spiritual, mental, and non-physical. So all that being said, when our energy body is not healthy, meaning we are tired, we are drained, we're not getting a proper amount of sleep, we're not getting the proper amount of sunlight, we're not getting the proper amount of oxygen, or just keeping our body in the health and vitality that is needed, as well as spiritually, we can lower our immune system of our energetic form. When this happens, we become more susceptible to entities and energies that are known as like the viruses and the bacteria of our energetic body. This is when we become depressed, when we become anxious, worried, when we begin to move into paranoid or chaotic states of the mind, when we are overwhelmed, all of these things. A lot of the emotional reactions come up when our emotional body, which is part of the layer of your auric field, begins to get any sort of energetic debris within it. So during this time of this pandemic, when we are being fed so much from the media populace that is really priming us for fear, for anxiety, for is also putting mandates in place that create a sense of interior hysteria or panic. This will just drive on the energy systems in the body to start to fritz out. And so it is of paramount importance that you have a practice of hygiene. Now, hygiene means you're keeping it in place, right? You brush your teeth every night. And that's not because you think you're going to get a cavity the next day. It's because the practice of it puts into a pattern of health. So this is why the energetic practices that I'm going to go into help move you into a regular practice of maintenance of energetic health and vitality. They sustain that for you so you don't have to go to the dentist and get a cavity. So you don't have to go to a shaman and get an extraction. So you don't have to have these large, heavy loading, panic attacks that we are trying to combat. It's the regular maintenance of your energetic body that moves you into a pattern of balance, a pattern of health. One thing that I wanted to mention before we go any further is that if you are an empath, if you are clairsentient, and you have the psychic gift or the extrasensory perception of picking up information from the non-physical realm and processing or transmuting it through the body, the emotional body as well as the physical body. If you know this about yourself, then you'll want to be very, very diligent with your energetic practices right now, even more so than the regular person who doesn't have that extrasensory perception activated in their energetic body, their muscles, if they're not actively using that energetic muscle. And that being said, if you're empathic, you are helping process the emotional energy of the collective as well as your individuated experience. Now, we are all doing this on some level, but those that are highly aware of it, of the transmutation through their own body, meaning bringing in the dark and the dense energies and needing to clear them out through their experience, you may be familiar with asking yourself the practices of, is this my energy or is this energy of those that I'm surrounded by, the collective energy? This is so important during this time because you are powerful, like you are, I keep seeing this foot right now that my clairvoyance is kicking in. I'm seeing a foot basically stomp down, and it stomps all the way into the center of the earth, creating a pole all the way down into the center of the earth, created all the way up through your own body, and then there's light coming out of your head. So anyways, this vision that they're showing me at the same time, those of you that are empaths needing to ground deeper into Mother Earth than you ever have before, and then bringing that elongated spine, your pranic tube, that light body tube in connection with the higher guidance, or the sky peoples, or your sense of connection with the divine, with whatever the divine is for you, your ascended masters, your religious upbringing, things that feel absolutely pure and divine and love for you, connecting up and just broadcasting that sense of energy, not necessarily with your words. You don't have to preach it. You have to be it. You have to be that strong sense of lighthouse. Anyways, if you are empathic, during this time, you'll want to be very cognizant of getting extra sleep because your body will be processing, literally transmuting a lot of this through the form, and you'll want to make sure that you're giving yourself time to recalibrate. Now, sleep is so important because it moves us outside of the ego body. So there's no dissonance with the ego during our sleep time. So it essentially recalibrates your energetic field. It nulls, it brings you into that 0 point balance without the noise or the disharmony or the dissonance of an ego, of a mental mind that talks back or goes against or doubts or has any of that interaction. So the ego can be seen on an energetic level as that which creates noise or friction. So it's as if I'm seeing right now in my clairvoyance these sine waves, right? Just like as if someone was playing a piece of music, but they were slightly off key. And so this other sound wave is coming in and it's creating dissonance. And those two sound waves begin to create friction, and this is where we get static electricity. So there's actual, literal physics to it, but there's also a sensory aspect in the body. What happens when you hear a piece of music or when you turn to a radio station and you're not quite on that radio dial, it literally will create a sense of physical nausea in the body. It will create a sense of headache in the head. It will create this rejection of the experience. So when we sleep, when we give ourselves additional sleep, it rids us of that other sound wave that comes in through the ego mind that creates a sense of worry, a combat against the ease and the flow of where we're going. And because we're getting so many downloads right now, it's really heavy with change during this time. So we're getting a lot of help from the non-physical realm that is trying to amplify the energy of health and vitality in Mother Earth. We're seeing this literally with a lot of the water coming up clear, the pollutants are clearing. Everything is elevating through light within the earth in itself. And so we're getting a lot of help from the non-physical realm to help purify this out. But in order for this to happen, essentially there's also a detox for the human body. And so we're going to want to create any sort of space for our body that gives us non-dissonance, non-noise-based energy, so we don't fight against it, we create harmony. So basically, all that being said, sleep more, especially if you're empathic, because you're going to be transmuting all of this for yourself as an individual, as well as the collectives that you're a part of. Now, everybody, even if you're not empathic, are doing this at some level, whether you're conscious of it or not. You're doing it for your nuclear family. This is one of the collectives that you're a part of. You're doing it for your gender dynamic. This is another collective that you're a part of. You're doing it for your race dynamic. This is another collective that we're born into. Humanity has chosen part of these templates of purification through collectives. So you're doing it anyways, whether you're conscious of it or not, but make sure that you are giving yourself plenty of restorative energy where your mind is not a part of that interaction. Okay, so sleep is very, very important. This is inclusive of sleeping during the day or moving into contemplation, which is kind of it's an alpha-like brainwave state, so not full theta, but you're basically kind of daydreaming or contemplating. You may be looking at a tree, looking at a piece of artwork. Oftentimes we fall into these alpha brainwave states where it's precognitive. We're not fully cognitive in our mind, but our brainwave is loose enough to move us into the dynamic and the experience of peace, right? Physiologically, we're experiencing peace. Our brainwaves are at a kind of still point, a medium point, that middle road for ourselves. So finding yourself there. This is a non-combative, so a non-ego based, so no dissonance, no noise in the sound frequencies that you are bringing through the body. So you'll want to amplify those times of contemplation, times of daydreaming, times of sleeping more. These types of things will be very, very good for the body. Another thing that I will say about you empaths, I didn't really intend to focus on this group, but I do need to say this before I go on. If you are empathic, if you are clairsentient, really if you are human and you have an awareness of your energetic body that processes things through the physical experience, you will also be processing some of the emotional clearings for the collective. Last week we went through a huge purging of sorrow, depression, a lot of people mourning the loss of people as well as mourning the loss of the life that they once had, the structure that they once used, things that felt normal before. So a loss of life, a loss of a way of life, and a loss of people, a loss of awareness, a loss of naivety, of innocence. There was a huge clearing of emotional sorrow that waved through last week. Some of you may be on the peak of the wave. Like I have some clients that I help mentor that traditionally feel things like 3 days before in a sense of primitive or premonition. Primitive, it's not primitive. Like pre-cognitive awareness of what is coming through the collective or what is about to be here. But that wave went through. Then now we're moving into the frustration or the anger wave, and this is coming up a lot for the collective. So people needing to really push through with a lot of screaming, drumming, punching, kicking, crying, screaming to the pillow, moving out the collective energy of frustration and anger. This is also coming through as a purging and moving through the chest. It needs to come out, so it needs to be vocalized here, primal screaming through the chest, all of this. If you are doing this, please allow yourself the expression to do this. Do not repress. Repressed energy is the first thing that will cause dis-ease in the body, okay? And dis-ease within the collective body, the energetic body. So because it starts creating friction, and the things that have a natural flow and need to come out and purify out the toxins of the body, when we leave those toxins in and suppress them, they begin to move and create difficulty within all the organ systems, within all of that. So make sure that you give fluidity to what you're feeling, that you give yourself permission with a conscientious awareness that you're doing this for yourself as for the collectives that you're a part of. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is some practices for energetic hygiene to keep yourself clear. Now, one of those would be what I just described as emotional clearing. So giving yourself permission to cry and wail when you're experiencing that sensation of sorrow, to scream or drum or kick. You can just grab a pillow and scream into it. I have a punching bag that I punch. Move in the fluidity of expression when it needs to come out. That is a regular sense of hygiene that is needed and is imperative not to repress the energy. So the power of secret energy or of suppressive energy is like that of implosive energy versus explosive energy. It's incredibly potent, so much more potent. So you do not want to put this inside and create a sense of potency in the negative way of feeling the anger, the fear, the frustration inside. You want to always let it flow out here. So that is a regular hygiene practice of emotional fluidity, emotional expression. Again, you don't need to target it at anyone or anything. You just need to give fluidity to it, permission for yourself to feel what you feel, for yourself and for the collective. The next thing I'll say about energetic hygiene is putting some practices in use that feel protective and clearing. So this is the simple use of sage, of Palo Santo. Now these herbs have a lot. So Palo Santo is a root of a tree, but these have been used in the native community forever. And they're known to work for clearing, same with holy water, clearing. And holy water is just water that's been prayed over. It's kind of imbued with a sense of holy or sanctification. Now water itself, the molecules, if you are familiar with Dr. Emoto's work, they're basically programmable, just like a quartz crystal, and how quartz crystals are used as the basis of our watches, our computer systems, all of that. Water is even more programmable and it has memory to it. So water and the molecules themselves, creating holy water for yourself. You pray over the water, you hold it, essentially imbuing it with a sense of protection, whatever you want to do with that water, whether you want it to purify or create protection for your household. And you can pray over your bath water and do this. You can have a dropper of water and put it in the thresholds. You can drop it over your head, just like a baptismal water. The key is to first pray over, essentially imbue it, program that water with the intentional energy, and you need to be in alignment with what you're doing. That's the first thing I'll say about that. When you start to program any sort of crystal or any sort of molecule or anything, you need to be very intentional. So you need to mean it. You don't play with that. You're not like, why don't you just clear us, spritz us? No, you get very, very sincere. And this doesn't mean angry, or it doesn't mean this like, I'm going to put this in. It's not power. It's a purity of the heart that says this is absolutely what is being done. This water is absolutely maintaining in the purest elemental form protection, clarity, and peace. Whatever it is, this energy is the way that you would imbue and program the water, holding it, setting that into place. Essentially a heartfelt prayer. You do that over your bath water or your shower water. You can do it on your shower head. I always utilize the palm chakra. They have a lot of power in terms of healers, to touch it and utilize that integration with the physical form, because I want it to physically be purifying, to physically be holy and sanctifying me and my family. So water can be used as a regular clearing of the self. Again, set the intention first. If you want to amplify that through the mineral kingdom, then you would put salt. I would recommend salt in the water. So using salt as a detoxifier, letting the salt pull off anything that is toxic on the body, that is toxic in the body, and letting it move down the drain. So essentially hold the salt in your hand, tell it what you want it to do, and then throw it into the water, and then know that that is being done. Be conscious of it, like a meditative bath. All right. You can also utilize the mineral of salt. Salt has been known to have a sense of barrier protection for a long time. First, it amplifies light. It is a prismatic amplifier of all of the light spectrum that is also non-physical and physical, meaning we can see it, and there's some spectrum that we cannot see that moves into the non-physical realm, that those that don't have human eyes and human optics can still see. It also combats the physical, any sort of belly crawlers like snakes, any ailments or things that were known to kind of come through. In the ancient days, they would create a salt barrier because it would burn the skin of any sort of snakes or reptiles or things that were coming in, and it would protect the village. So there's a physical protection of creating that salt barrier around your household, on the thresholds of your doors and your windows, and asking, again, holding the salt, setting that intentional energy of essentially imbuing or giving a direction of only letting in that which is in the harmony and the vibrational resonance of light in its true light form, which is that of love, of peace, of purity, of unification. And you can set that again on your thresholds of your windows, any area which feels open or exposed or vulnerable. Also, you can do this underneath the bed. If you're having a hard time with your dream space, or you're feeling like that needs protection, or you need clearing there, then you can put salt in your pillowcase in a little baggie. You can put salt in a baggie underneath your bed. These are regular practices that have a sense of clearing and protection with them. Another thing with salt, if you notice that you tend to move into the language of fear, you tend to move into the language of paranoia, then you can gargle with salt. So this is a physical reminder, and when we do these physical reminders, it's a bit like a ritual. You're creating a new pattern where you involve the body, a physical practice of gargling salt water, with the intentional spiritual intention of what you're doing, of like, I am clearing my mouth. I am putting soap in my mouth, right? I am clearing out, not literal soap. I'm using that as a metaphor, but I'm clearing my language. I'm clearing my throat. I'm clearing all expression of anything that involves fear, paranoia, or breeding and amplifying that energy that I don't want in my household, of that of separation, of that of paranoia, whatever it is that's affecting your household or your voice or your expression. Moving that salt and gargling it through and then spitting it out. This is also a ritualistic practice. In the shamanic community, spitting is and throwing up or purging. This is a regular practice of how to detoxify the body of heavy, dark, dense toxins. A lot of plant medicine involves purging. A lot of sacred ceremonies in terms of sweats involve purging and detox and extreme movement out of the body. So this is not a bad thing. This is viewed as a very good detox for the body. So after you're doing the regular gargling of the salt water, you're spitting out the toxins with the intentional energy and the spiritual, sincere heart of spitting out any sort of toxin, whether that's a mental toxin, whether that's, again, psychological, whether it's emotional, whether it's physical within the body. You are spitting it out. You are pulling that out from the belly of your being and expelling it into the sink, and then you watch it go down the drain. So there's a finality to that and a little bit of ritual and ceremony space, even though this is a regular thing, just like brushing your teeth. If you do this with the intentional energy, knowing what you're doing, teaching your family to do the same thing, there is an element that aligns with the heart, spiritual practices of what you're doing, right? The same is done with taking off any material things at the doorway, at the threshold. A lot of cultures do this. They take off their shoes at the threshold. There's a sense of, I will not bring any mud, anything that I have picked up or scuffed along the way. I will keep this household pure and I will keep it clean. So having a practice of cleaning, of keeping everything clean in your thresholds is great energetic hygiene. Whether it be taking off the clothes that you wear at work, taking off the shoes that you wore, getting into play clothes, making a practice, and not just doing this, we do this anyways, but being conscientious in a more ritual or ceremonial way that highlights the intention of why you're doing what you're doing as energetic hygiene. I don't want to bring any sort of heaviness, any stress, any worry into my household. I want my children to be pure of that. I want my family and the area to feel like it really is a sanctuary. And in order to keep that sanctuary pure, I'm going to take off anything that reminds me or that carries the material element that might have been absorbed by that stress or that toxic energy that I would have picked up in my workplace or wherever I was or whatever I was doing, whether it was just out and about and interacting with people that were chaotic, whatever that may be for you. So having a regular practice of essentially leaving things at a threshold point and teaching your children to do the same. We change our outfits when we move into play energy, or when we get home, we let our work clothes go or our shoes go, and we say, now I am in a relaxed energy where I can be truly myself, where I do not have to carry any sort of stress or heaviness or density from the day. This is my space of sacred freedom. Create that for yourself. Okay, by taking off some of the shoes, by taking off some of the clothing, and creating that as a ritual practice that you're aware of and you're conscientious of what you're doing. I want to give 2 other things. When I mentioned saging the household, Palo Santoing the household, I want to make sure that I say this without forgetting or not mentioning it, is that you want to make sure that when you sage, and I have a video back in the archive of how to clear negative and dense energy in the practice of saging or Palo Santo. And when you start at the threshold point, you always want to have that point open, like a door that stays open. You want to have an exit point for the dark and dense energies. So when you're clearing them and you're utilizing that herb or that root to clear, now the herb will clear the air, the root will clear the ground, right? So Palo Santo is a root, and that's known for clearing kind of dark, kind of dense, more material type of energies. Sage will move into a smoke. I mean, the Palo Santo will also move into a smoke, but sage is an herb that essentially will clear and a little bit more diffuse, like the air aspects of it. So you'll want to clear there, and as you're clearing that and you're saying the prayer and you're wafting it either with your hand or with a feather, you're moving all the energy out of that exit point. Make sure that you do this and you have the door open or windows open. You have exit points for this energy to leave out of, or any entities to leave out of the house. This is to clear space. You can also clear a person with sage or Palo Santo by clearing their field. You'll also want to fan it out, and you'll want to have an exit point in their field, whether that's determined like this is my exit point, I'm going to fan everything up and towards the right. You'll want to be conscientious about where you're moving the energy out of, sending it back to the light, sending it back to the earth, sending it back to be recalibrated out of this earth's atmosphere, someplace that feels far away and distant from this individual. Then the last thing I want to say is about absorbent stones. So dark black stones are so helpful during this time for absorption of any dense and dark energies. So black stones, black onyx, black kyanite, black tourmaline, black river rocks, black stones, just like our black clothing, will be absorbent of the sunlight and energy and warmth. There is a literal component to those minerals that has a natural absorbency. That's what they're made to do. That's their thing. So they are good at it. So utilize the black stones. I'm gonna get out and show you for a second. Hold on. If I can. I just grabbed a handful. These are my black kind of stones, river rocks, and I have these all underneath this fainting couch, which is where I do my energy work on people when they come into the office. They used to come into the office in person. But you can put some of those underneath your bed. Black stones, if there's a lot of energy that you're wanting to absorb, you can also line them very nicely on a path entering your household, your door. You can put them in, some people put them in their sinks, and as they're expelling things out of the body, like spitting their toothpaste out at night, or like we talked about earlier, gargling water and spitting, there's a sense of anything dark and dense being absorbed into the stones. You can literally put your hands on them and ask that anything heavy, anything toxic, just be pulled out of you into the stone. And they literally work just like dark clothing naturally will start absorbing the sunlight. You don't have to tell your clothing, absorb sunlight, make me hot. The alloy, the mineral, the components within that mineral kingdom know what to do. This is how they're built. This is part of their natural transmutation of energy, pulling things in. So they will pull in those dark and dense energies, and they're helpful in terms of regular maintenance. Your thoughts are chaotic, you can put the stone on your third eye. If your belly is having issues processing anxiety, you can put the stones on the belly. You can utilize the dark stones as an absorber of any noise or friction, or almost like static electromagnetic energy that's being moved out of the body. So it's really helpful to have those as a regular energetic practice. But I want to just encourage you all, the same as I ended my previous video on psychic protection during this time of great transition for us as humanity, I want to end with a sense of reminding you of your sovereign energy, of your capability as a divine being, choosing to be on this planet in this time. Make no mistake that before you were born into form, you knew that this probability was an option for humanity. And as we moved into this probability, I want to encourage you just to stand in your own sense of strength, what that looks like for you. Move deeply into your center space. Create practices for you like this energetic hygiene and psychic protection that give you a sense of strength, of remembering your power, not power of dominance, but power of your own authority. That's a very different energetic state of being, of remembering who you are, that none of the externals can take that from you, because they absolutely cannot. And you are an eternal being. Nothing can change that. And I just want to encourage you in that space of moving deeply into your sense of your own personal authority, finding practices for you that are helpful, that are sustaining, life-sustaining to your own life force energy. And to those of you that are called to be used as lighthouses for humanity, to just encourage you to stand very, very tall, not with your words, but with your private practice, with your integrity and diligence to your practices of the heart. This is where it counts. Not the material, not what anyone sees, but your private practices of the heart. This is your integrity of your character, the soul of your being. Stand tall in who you are, in your integrity and your private practices during this time, because it absolutely matters. I love you all. Blessings.